I will present a paper entitled The Impacts of 2015 Senior High School National Examination Policy Reform on Educators in Indonesia. This study is under supervision of Nur Zainaya Mokhtar. National examination is a standardized test and high-stakes test of education in Indonesia, and it is giving a psychological pressure to students, educators, and parents. However, in the early of 2015, the new Minister of Education of the Republic of Indonesia has decided to reform the national examination purpose as a factor in deciding the student's graduation by assigning school a full authorization in deciding students' graduation. As Ball in 1993 and Bell in 1999 explained that all policies have intentional and unintentional significant impacts on all members in an organization, and it is difficult to avoid the impacts. Therefore, I assume that the national examination policy reform has certainly impacts on the educators in Indonesia. The purpose of study: to examine the impacts of the policy reform on educators in Indonesia by investigating the reforming points of the policy, analyzing the reforming aspects respectively in the new national exam policy and its impacts on educators, giving feedback to educators to respond to the new policy and the authority in order to make a better policy in the future. Research questions: what are the differences between the 2014 and 2015 national exam policy reform? What are the changing aspects in the 2015 national exam policy reform? What are the impacts of the 2015 national exam policy reform on the educators? How the educators should respond to the 2015 national exam policy reform? I found the differences between the 2014 and 2015 senior high schools national exam policy in Indonesia as I describe in the table. Aspect number 1, the purpose of national exam. As I have mentioned before, now, school has a full authorization in deciding students' graduation. So, I marked it as a reformed point. Aspect number 2, the national exam technology. Now, student doing their national exam in paper-based test or computer-based test. However, only students in selecting school who doing their exam in front of computer. I marked it as a reformed point. Aspect number 3, the difficulties level of exam. Now the exam questions more difficult, because this time, the exam using higher order thinking question and contextual issues. I also marked it as a reformed point. For aspect in this table, there are no differences between the 2014 and 2015 national exam policy. So, I have found the differences between the 2014 and 2015 national exam policy reform and the changing aspects in the 2015 national exam policy reform. What's next? I still have to find the impacts of the national exam policy reform on the educators, and how the educators should respond to this policy reform. And these are my references. Thank you for your attention.